Live? Yes. Working? Yes, it is. Brilliant. Well, we got there in the end. Welcome to the final QE Babble of the year, rearranged. It should have been last week. So, first of all, apologies to anyone who tried to watch last week. And I'm so sorry we couldn't run the event. It certainly wasn't for the want of trying. We tried on the platform for about 20 minutes, but would you believe we ran into some sort of bug, some sort of potential testing issue. The integration between StreamYard, where we record, and LinkedIn just wasn't working. Perhaps that rings some bells for people. So, QE Babble has this year done 9 events. We've had 24 panelists, over 3,000 viewers to the videos. We've got 1,000 new subscribers across Meetup and on LinkedIn. It's been really, really busy. We've covered things like AI in testing. We've covered delivering at speed. We've covered career pathways, quality coaching, and loads more. So massive thanks to all the panelists who've been on, everyone who's watched along, and we're going to do loads more next year. Today is all about shifting left. It's a concept that's been in the industry for a long time. It's spoken about a lot, but how many companies and how many teams truly get there? And what does that journey look like? So welcome to QE Babble. Here are our panelists for today. We've got Parveen Khan and Matt Conway. Hello to you.
Hi, Dan. Hello, everyone.
Thanks. Thank you for joining us. It's a real shame. We did have another panelist, which was Justin Pilkinson. You would have seen his lovely face on all of the marketing for this. Justin unfortunately can't make it today. He's absolutely gutted. He's been messaging this morning, but for personal reasons can't attend. So he's really sorry, but he has given me some of his thoughts that I'm going to try and share with you later on this topic. So we're going to look at 3 things, which I've just covered. The first one being where are we at with shift left as a concept. And if it's okay, Parveen, I'm going to come to you first and ask you to introduce yourself briefly and tackle that first question for us.
Yep.
So where do you think we're at with shift left as a concept? Where's the industry with it now?
Cool. So I'll quickly start with my intro. Like, I'm Parveen Khan, and I'm currently working as a quality practice lead at CFC. So with the question, where are we currently at shift left? So I think this topic is coming a lot, especially during these days. And it's as you mentioned, right, Matt? Like, this topic has been around for a long time. It's not a new a concept, or it's not a new topic, but I think it's taking a lot of traction right now because we are going into thinking about quality holistically, and which is why we like, a lot of us, like, in the industry, want to talk about how, when we think about only shifting to the left, what limitations we will have and why. And I think it's more about thinking how to move that mindset, how to think about more holistic testing and more continuous testing. So that's I think, and more of it is more about, like, there's a lot of challenges, right? Like, challenges in the sense is like, when people think about shift left, we only think about shifting to the left, and we miss, like, a lot of times, I think the teams I've worked with, like, we miss out the whole full bigger picture, and we miss out how we can build quality throughout and not just to the shift at one place. So I think this is why this topic is coming a lot now, and I think it's really interesting to talk about this, given we need to think more about how do we build quality in a holistic way and in a continuous way.
Yeah, and do you think it's changed? Companies' approach to shift left has changed.
I think there's a lot of misconceptions still, I would say, in around what shift left is and how to approach that, and how and who can enable that. And there's a lot of misconceptions yet in that area, and a lot of companies, I feel like they're still struggling, like, to even say that, okay, this is what are we doing in terms of shifting left. Does the team has that understanding? Do we know why we need to shift left? Like, there are a lot of misconceptions around there, And we talk about this topic, right? But then what exactly does that mean? As I said, like,
Mm.
does it has an like actions like to take, like these are the steps that you need to take, and this is how you can measure. And I mean, it's not about measuring how far left you are, but it's about knowing like how early you're starting your testing, right? And again, I think this topic is even more important right now is because we have to think a lot about when we release stuff, testing in production, how do we shift to the right? And then that's where the whole shifting in all direction comes in, like not just shift in one direction, not just shift to the left and shift to the right, but shift, look at the quality overall at every step and what
Mhm.
actions you're taking. So I think when I talk about companies specifically, a lot of companies, I feel like they are they might be still struggling with the misconceptions to clarify and to take the right actions in order to shift to the left. Like in order to, what are we even shifting to the left? Like start quality early on is what I would say.
Okay. Thank you. Matt, feel free to introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Matt Conway. I am head of test delivery at a head consultancy at the moment. I've been around the industry for probably more decades than I care to mention. Long-term connection with Matt as well, and pleased to meet Praveen Parvan today. And sorry about Justin as well. So where are we with shift left as a concept? So, in my view, I look at multiple industries and across the board. I think the views are different almost by industry about how they've adopted shift left and even probably what shift left means to them. So, if you go into retail, for instance, they're talking about shift left as a concept from making sure the requirements are clear. I introduced something at a big retailer quite a few years ago, and as Parveen said, it's not a new concept. It's just whether it's adopted and how well it's adopted, and people jumping on and saying, "Oh, we can't use that in Agile. We can't use that in DevOps." Well, you actually can, and it's about if you take the retail industry, it's about make sure the requirements are clear, make sure they're concise, make sure they're testable, making sure there's no assumptions in them. Statistics have shown over the years that you can actually find 80% of defects before a single line of code is written. And I think that's a really major statistic that people, in these times when every industry is trying to save money and start thinking about, I can find 80% of my defects before I've written any code, while somebody's written them on a Word document or Excel spreadsheet or something like that. That's a huge cost saving. And it's about how you take that to the industry and how you sell that to people. And there are other industries. Finance is so far behind on shift left, I would say. Oil and gas are pretty switched on it and how we test it. And if you are talking about requirements, I think a good phrase that I got about 10 years ago off a fellow tester of mine is don't document the program, program the document. So if you make sure everybody understands what the end goal is, so the requirements clear, everybody's on the same page. But a long time ago, we used to have a waterfall model where the users used to come up and say, "This is what we want." And if I say, go into a new garage and say, "I want a car with a wheel in each corner, and can you deliver it Saturday, and I'll see you then," that's kind of what they did. And they never got the car that they wanted in the end, because they only came back 2 years later when the whole thing had been built and the developers had built something that they made assumption from a requirement. The testers had tested something else because it was their assumption from the requirement. And then UAT came in at the end. You had to start all over again or scrap it. So yeah, don't go into the garage and ask for a car with a wheel at each corner, because you might get an Aston Martin Vanquish and you might have 4 kids. They're not going to fit in it, right? So specify the requirements, test the requirements, do some static testing.
So one of the things that Parveen just mentioned there was like, why should we shift left? I'm quite interested in that, because obviously in tech, there's a huge amount of there's a lot of jargon, there's lots of sayings, and there's a lot of chatter in the community about how things should be done. And I'm just curious whether you've ever faced a sort of situation where companies are, questioning why we should do this, and whether they just feel like it's it's the hottest new thing in the industry, or it's that what people say we should do. Is it always fit for every situation? Do you think sometimes we can get caught up in more being influenced by what the community or industry says we should be doing?
Yeah, I think. Oh, sorry, go on, Purman. No, me. Okay. I think for me that's a question of what's in it for me, and every stakeholder that you get, whether it's a BA or a CXO person, wants to know what's in it for me. If we're going to invest extra money up front in a shift left concept, and probably at the tail end in a shift right concept, they want to know what's in it for me. And depending on who you're selling that concept to first, is how you approach that. So if you've got a project manager there, for instance, what's in it for me? Well, we can assure a common understanding right from the very start. We can utilize a varying perspectives by getting everybody together and talking about shift left. We can get developers and testers and BAs and users all in a room to talk about this. And what we're talking about there is we're talking about delivering the concept of quality over testing. And the subtle difference is that quality is about defect prevention, where testing is about identifying defects. So it's about putting that quality wrapper around what we do, rather than just the traditional tail end. It's the testers holding us up going to market because testing's taking so long. Well, testing won't take so long if you've already done it before.
Do you ever face that situation though, where there's and I'm not asking you to talk about in your current job, but just sort of curious across your career, where there's a sort of an eye roll when new concepts, processes, tools are mentioned, that the status quo clearly might be the easiest, or is probably always the easiest or quickest option. And I imagine that things like this, can't be implemented overnight. Do you think in that regard, is it hard to get people to really buy into this? Parveen, do you want to answer that one?
Yeah. So I think it segues into the previous question as well, right? It's about,
yes.
So I think a lot of stuff, it totally depends on the context, whether what we apply and what we not. But shift left is pretty much like from getting a buy-in from company is like a lot of companies go like, yeah, this is something we need, because as I said, like it's not something new. Companies know that we have to there is a benefit of applying this, but then as I said, right, they have this misconception that, okay, yes, we need to shift left, but for them what they think is like, yes, let's do let's look at test automation. So that's what shift left for, like I think that's what my experience has been like when I'm talking about, right? And the buy-in comes in saying that, okay, this is the preconception that when you talk about shift left, it's more about like, yes, we can automate everything and we should be automating everything as early as possible. That's the misconception that the companies have, is like that this is why and this is how we need to shift left. But that's not the only thing. When we talk about this, it's so much more, as Matt mentioned, right? It's more about what, like thinking about looking at the requirements, having common understanding. Are we all, regardless of whether we have a quality engineer or a tester or whatever, like quality hat you call it as, like regardless of any one person, like are we all thinking about these things? How early are we thinking about testing? Like, I think we need to educate the companies, like we need to help them understand what actually it means. And it's not about, we can't just say that we are automating everything, so we are shifting to the left. So I think more than getting a buy-in, I think getting a buy-in, yes, but then trying to help them understand what exactly it means and giving them the clarity is really even more important. And that helps, because when you talk about automation, right, it feels like, oh, it's doable, it's very quick, we can do it, like, it's very quick. But when you talk about the concept, when we help them understand, that's where it becomes like, how long does it take, why does it take? Because it's not about the tooling that we get in, right? It's about building that quality mindset, building that culture, building that understanding for the people of what we need to do continuously. Like, how do we think of, how do we challenge the requirements, how do we question the requirements, how do we check whether these are testable, how do we think even before even actually starting implementing the features, right? So it's about building that mindset, and it cannot be done in, like, in some given time, right? It takes a lot of practice. We say, like, everyone needs to be testing, like we need to first enable them to be able to do that. So it takes a lot of things. So I think getting a buy-in, then helping them understand these misconceptions will help in setting the expectation of, like, how long will it take and why is it important and how can it be done.
Enablement's an interesting point. So are you referring to enabling people who aren't necessarily dedicated quality engineers,
Yeah.
but actually giving them, or trying to sort of change the mindset to empower
Yeah.
them that they need to be involved in the testing or quality process as well?
Yeah, because we can say, like, everyone needs to test, but if we don't enable them, if we don't help them, what tools they can use. Like, when I say tools, as an example, like, if we say about shift left, right, if we are doing three amigos, or if we are doing refinements, what kind of questions do we need to ask, like, to bring the quality perspective in early on? So that's the thing, right? So it's about, like, one of the example I can give is, like, the teams that I work with, I provide, like, again, not to say, like, giving them some kind of checklist so that they can use, so that they understand what kind of questions they can ask, like, and again, not to say that we give them exact list of questions, but it's more about a cheat sheet, right? It's more about, like, helping. So what kind of these kind of tools are we providing people who so that we can enable them? So that's how I see, that's what I meant by enabling, that helping them understand, helping them what they need to do, how, and giving them the tools and frameworks or guidelines to do this kind of stuff.
Just thinking about sort of implementing a process, it, on the face of it, you would think that if we're talking about, let's say a startup company, and you've got the ability to, set processes from the ground up, from day one, then I suspect that doing this would be quite a lot easier. But Matt, if I come to you, like, let's say there's a scenario where we're talking about, maybe a more traditional, more old school type business or industry sector, with teams of people who might have slightly more entrenched views or have been with the organisation for much longer. How would you go about, sort of coming in and sort of saying, right guys, so I think we need to change things here. I think we need to be really looking at quality from day one, rather than it just being pushed to me just before you want to put it out the door.
Yeah, exactly. And getting buy-in is key to doing this, because everybody's driven by different factors, and you do have to set the company up for success. And in my experience, it doesn't matter whether you've got a brand new startup and this so-called blank sheet that you can start with. All those people are going to come along with preconceptions. They've not just come out of school and university. They've got their baggage with them from what they've done in previous companies and ideas. And us in the engineering sector of IT and technology, we're really resistant to change. Back in the old days when I first started out, people used to say, well, why are you doing this? They say, well, I've always done it this way, but times have moved on, right? And how many times do you hear that? I've always done it this way. So it's about, to get the buy-in from people, especially people have been doing it for years and years a certain way. You've really got to get down to what motivates them and how that's going to be great. Is it going to be a C-suite person that you're going to be able to help meet their cost targets and therefore they're going to get their 100% bonus this year, you know, or is it the project manager or the head of testing that's going to succeed and do really well with his team? But it's about explaining that to them, and so many places and so many companies that I go in these days, even now, everybody's working in silos. And yeah, we fully adopted Agile, we fully adopted CI/CD pipeline, but actually when you look at it, they're all working in silos. So it's getting that collaboration. And in this day and age where a lot of us are remote, I think all three of us here on the panel are all sitting in our own houses today. I think there is still a call to get people together in a workshop and see the whites of their eyes. And that way you can see what the motivator is, not just let them tell you, but you can actually see it in their expression. Is this setting you up for success? Is this something that enthuses you? Can you buy into this concept? Because if you've got people on the team that don't buy into it, it's going to be a failure from the start. So you've got to find that motivator for that individual person, no matter what area, and just talk about it. Maybe just, I'm a delivery team now. I don't have a job title. I've now moved. Maybe have a job title with the company, but for this project or this program, I'm part of this team. And then you get that concept over. I think that once you've got the senior management buy-in, so the people that's holding the purse strings have bought into this, I think the best way to do it is to put a collaborative team together and maybe forget about what your job title is in the HR system, but here you are, you're assigned to a team.
And I suppose it's about, because you were saying, it's critical to get the buy-in from the senior stakeholders, probably by illustrating what's in it for them, how it's going to affect their bottom line, sales, whatever it is, quality of features being rolled out. But implementing any change involves time or money or both. So if you're sort of going into an organization saying, right, I think we need to consider quality a lot earlier than we are at the moment, I'm guessing that's not an overnight thing. So it's trying to how do you go about sort of explaining that to a CIO, that I'm going to need to speak to all the different people involved in managing the product team and software engineers and explain that they're actually going to need to be involved in this process as well. But for me to do that, it's going to take time. At that point, would there be pushback? Well, we just want to carry on as we are for now.
Quite often there is pushback at that stage. If we're going to go down a discovery phase and then a design phase and a delivery phase, there's a concept that I've been using in more recent years, the 3D approach. When you've got that design, that's when you want to start involving as many people as possible, because you've got a lot of these projects won't come to fruition if there's not a return on investment for the seniors, right? So you've got to prove at that point that there's a return on investment doing this. There might be 10% more cost in the discovery phase up front, but the savings down the line, you've got to be able to prove that that's going to be 40, 50, 80%, because you're programming that quality in so much earlier, where it's quicker, cheaper to fix. You're going to get fewer defects for the testers to find, whether they be working collaboratively with the developers or whether they're shoved to the end of the process and doing it there. I think we are a bit of eye rolling in this industry. Probably testers out of everybody are the most resistant to change, but you've just got to explain, get that clear communication. As I said earlier, what's in it for me, for each person, what's motivating them, and having a good workshop where you can talk to people about it and make sure that their needs are covered in what you're doing. You'll get buy-in.
I'll just flash up some of the things that are coming in for people watching. It's provoking some conversation, which is always good to see. So this is from, it says LinkedIn user, but it's Talat Rani, who I know. So thanks for watching. Clear communication and early collaboration is the key to success, which is definitely buys into what Parveen was saying. And then this is David, who said, ideally, you shift left at the idea stage of a potential feature. So I guess that means very, very early on, before any work is done. This is a really interesting one from Steve Davenport. So cheers for watching, Steve. So he said, and it's going into the last point we just made, has the panel got any experience of measuring the cost of quality in the shift left context? And if they have, how can we get started with it? This might be a difficult question for you. Sorry, I did say there might be some. Does anyone want to try and tackle that?
Yeah, I think, measuring cost of quality only at the shift left is completely like, okay, how do we even measure one part, like one side of it? But how do we, like, I see when you look at shift left, when you're measuring how, like, it's about shifting quality to the left. It's about shifting, it's about starting quality early, right? So how do we measure that? How do we measure what we're doing? Like how has it impacted implementing whatever changes we have implemented? How does it impact or how does it help? So that's what we can measure, is how I see this as. And it's because if you see, like, how early are you, shift left is about, like, it's more about prevention, right? Like, how early are you detect, like, how you finding the issues? And I think defect leakage would be one of the thing that you can when you can see, like, you can try, like, you can measure. But again, not saying that that's the way, that's the only way you can measure, but there needs to be some key indicators to say, like, how early are we finding the issues early on, and how early are we thinking about implementing the automation, how are we picking up the automation coverage? So so these would be some of the indicators to look at. Like, maybe it depends on the teams, it depends on the context of what you want to measure, but these will be some of the metrics or some of the measures that, if I'm working on the teams, to see how early are we looking at things and how are we shifting to the left. And also looking at, are we all pairing, are we all testing, are we all like, collaboration is another thing. Like, it's not like one person is doing the testing or like one person is thinking about the testing, but are we pairing and doing the testing? And it's about being how reactive, how proactive we are, and not trying to look at the issues late in the cycle or think about. So I think these will be some of the metrics. Like, to summarize, it would be like looking at the automation, how much of automation coverage we have, are we automating that early enough, thinking about those, and are we pairing? And as I said, looking at the acceptance criteria and looking at the requirements and all this stuff, and how early are we fixing, like, defect leakage is one of the things that, as I mentioned.
Thank you. I'm going to put this on now. This is exactly that. So this is what I was going to ask Matt. If we were fully embraced agile and the teams are reasonably autonomous, do we really always need the buy-in from the powers that be? Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to do it just on a project level and you've got a fully, I'd love to see it, but a fully agile team, I've not come across it in my career so far, but let's say they have, and you control it and you've got all your requirements on the backlog and or a Kanban or whatever, do you need to get buy-in from the powers that be? Probably not. But by the time you're at that stage, it's probably already too late for a lot of the shift left concepts to go in. I'm talking about shift left in really upfront. You're probably going to have to ask the stakeholder, the seniors, for some kind of pre-engagement budget to go over it and just determine what everybody's expecting out of this. It's an interesting concept to try and do it without stakeholder buy-in, because they hold the purse strings. But there is always the other method to go down, is do it and then show the stakeholders how much you've saved like Pavin was saying about the cost of quality and the defect leakage. If you can prove that by actually doing it, it might be a way that it works. I have done. I have been into companies and say, give me a project and let me prove it works, and do it that way. The proof of the pudding's in the eating. And sometimes it's easier to ask for forgiveness rather than permission, isn't it?
I like it. So that was a comment, and the previous one was from someone called Eamon who was watching. So he said it's really important to get buy-in from senior people. He joined the company as the first QA engineer and tried with brute force to implement shift left principles to no avail. And it was only once he got the buy-in that people did start to accept the ideas we're suggesting. So I guess on a very basic level, getting the buy-in from the senior people probably helps with a drip down in terms of their influence on the other members of staff or team to help them really buy into it as well. So if you go into it without the buy-in from the senior stakeholders, then potentially you won't get it from other people. I guess is what he's alluding to there.
Absolutely, and he's right.
Yeah, and that's, I guess that works the same for anything you're trying to implement in any sort of team or company, doesn't it? That unless you've got the buy-in from the people who effectively call the shots or pay the bills, then it's probably quite difficult to get or expect people to come on the journey with you if they know the leadership might not even know anything about it. So interesting. Go on.
I was going to say, yeah, because the seniors are going to set the direction of travel for the company, aren't they? So if it's now embedded within the company philosophy that you are shift left, you're going to get buy-in immediately, because that's my job, isn't it, now, to be part of that.
Yeah. I'll put this one, actually. I guess it's slightly separate to what we're discussing, but this is gear again. He said, what is the cost of your current or poor quality? Angry customers, lots of unplanned work due to bugs or over rework, slow progress, trying to get the feel for how this changed as you would experiment with introducing new tools or methodologies. So I guess here we're talking about what are the implications to poor quality and maybe why shift left is an effective concept in the first place. Do you want to, Parveen, just tackle a few of those obvious ones of what the implications of poor quality are?
Yeah, I think it's pretty much like everything that's mentioned, right? It's more about it's a good point, right? Like it's about when we start implementing, it's not that we know we will start full blown starting with everything, right? It's a continuous slow incremental way, and it's like experimentation. And I think that's the point that's mentioned is really good point, saying that when we are experimenting, when we are implementing new approaches or the new ways or introducing these things, looking at the indicators, like looking at are we is anything changing? Like, are we still having any kind of like production instance P1s, or are we still having, or we don't want to end up in having like a full backlog of bugs sitting there and not, or resolving them all at once. Like, I think unplanned work, that's a big one, right? There are lots of unplanned work due to bugs, which is like if you're finding, that's another thing, right? If you're not pairing and if you're not thinking about those things, right, it's like you will end up in phases. Like you are developing the features, and then you sitting there because the bugs were raised very, very late in the cycle, and then you have to now go back, switch the context, and then fix all those bugs and then retest. So it becomes a slow feedback loop. So it's like looking at the indications of those things, and the cost of quality is like cost of time, like how much time are you spending in doing this rework, and how much time like it's being wasted when you not doing everything in parallel. I think everything is already mentioned, like as you said, like angry customer, cost of fixing the issues very late uh, rather than fixing it as we go, and context switching.
Thank you. Let's move on to, I should have said actually at the start of the session, apologies. We're obviously one panelist down. We were intending to do an hour today. We are going to shorten the session slightly and run for 45 minutes. So we've got about 10 minutes left and we've got one question we've still not even touched on yet. So let me get onto that one. This is something that kind of moves into the space that I operate in recruitment of quality engineers. So how does Shifting Left affect a company's approach to hiring or building their tech teams? And what we mean by that is, if we're encouraging more people to be involved in the quality process, does that potentially mean that companies will hire less standalone quality engineers as they're empowering more people to be involved here? Parveen, do you want to go with that one?
Yeah. I think that again, this comes to the fact of like misconception, but I won't say that we should, if we are shifting to the left, again, this comes right, if everything is automated, that we don't need any quality engineers is how it is seen as. But I don't think so. That's the right way to think. It might be like you don't need quality engineers. Maybe it would be more like you don't need many quality engineers, and maybe you need like a few of them, but we need them. The thing is, like, as I said, like, it's more about how do you enable the teams to do that. And you can't just say that once you have shifted to the left, all the quality problems have been solved, so now we don't need the tester or the quality engineer anymore, right? It's like it's quality is all the time needed. But again, it's up to like what approach or what model any company is having, whether it's quality engineer, quality coach, like any, like, having maybe less, but having that quality advocate or quality coach as a person who's helping the teams to think about quality continuously, because it's not like one time done and then it's there and we don't need to think about quality anymore. It's a continuous process. Improvements, like, it's a continuous feed. You need to take continuous feedback, you need to continuously improve, and it has to be done throughout. And it's not like you build the product and now you don't need to test anymore. It's not such thing, right? You have to continuously evolve the product, so you need to evolve quality continuously. So for that, you need the right people to help and coach the teams to do the right thing at the right time.
Thank you. Matt, any views on this?
Yeah, I think how does it affect the way that we build teams? I'll give you an example. I'm not going to mention names, but I was with one company that relabeled all their TAs overnight and called them QEs. Giving somebody a different job title doesn't give them that role. And as Parveen says, you need to have that quality coaching. You've got to explain what their new job title means, what they've got to do. You've got to give them the training to be able to do that. You've got to sell the concept. And it's not all about just automating really quickly. A lot of companies will say, automate everything, Matt, get everything and it'll run quickly. Well, do you know what? If you've got bad requirements, you're going to have a lot of bad tests that run really quickly and they're not going to do anything for you, right? So let's make sure that we're testing the right thing. Let's target the stuff that we're automating. Let's get the QEs involved earlier so that they can understand what they're doing. Manually test once maybe and then move into automation. Make sure that the test runs well instead of just having thousands of tests. Instead of having a 2-week regression cycle that's manual, having an overnight run, but you're going to deliver a lot of defects, which in a way is a good thing. But are those defects, when you've done the root cause analysis, because a requirement was wrong, a misunderstanding in the requirement? Get that right first, and I think you'll get there. And yeah, companies do like to jump on the bandwagon of the latest and greatest that comes in without really understanding what it means. And I'm sure there'll be a lot of nodding heads when I tell people that most of the companies that I go into and they say they're agile, they're not. They're sort of mini waterfalls or wagile, or however you want to do it. And the concept was nice, and they've got a different reason for adopting the Agile Manifesto, if that's what they want to do. A lot of people use that to cut down on the amount of documentation that they want to produce, for instance, and it's not necessarily the case that that's what it's for. So yeah, people will change their approach and they'll start recruiting QEs and quality people without realizing actually what it means. And I think that's the job of us senior people, senior testers, to explain to them this is what the concept actually means. Don't just adopt the principle. You've got to actually get behind it and believe in it and set your team up for success. You get, we've said this a few times on this discussion, setting people up for success in whatever they do is key. Because if you don't do that, they're going to leave the organization pretty quickly.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's one of those things, isn't it, that potentially people are a little bit fearful of, a bit like with or, test automation, or even with AI, that if the company truly embraces these concepts or ways of working, then actually it means that there might not be the space for the standalone QE engineer to operate, that other people can do it, or sort of machines can do it. But I think definitely what you're saying, Parvin, in particular, is that there's always going to be a need for people to specialize in this. Do you think there's ever going to be a scenario where, if a company has truly shifted left and considers quality from the outset, that simply by having quality coaches, you're not going to need people in standalone testing or quality engineer roles?
I think it purely depends on where the company is on their journey. If it totally depends on where they are on the journey in terms of how the team, what is the team's level of understanding of quality, understanding of how do they approach, how do they build in. So it's totally depends on, because a lot of companies, there are companies like who don't have any quality engineers and it works, but how long and what did it take for the companies to be there is what it matters to understand. Like, it's like we cannot just say that, oh, we don't everyone can test, so we don't need any quality engineers, so just remove them and just do it in a one, like, it cannot happen in one, like in just as a switch on and off kind of a thing. It's more of, it takes a transition, it's a transitional journey to get there as well. So it's again, like, I think a lot of times we shouldn't be thinking about quality, like we are what are we trying, like, they are enablers. So I see quality engineers and enablers, and what we are doing is we are trying to build the quality, right? Like, how are we trying to build that? Whether you use the role as a quality engineer, test engineer, quality coach, that whoever the test specialist is, right? So it's more about thinking about quality and where the company is on their transformation journey, and then what does it take to get there. Like, I think that's why I say, like, it depends on the context of where the companies are to get to the level of not having quality engineers in their teams, and what is their operating model. How do they, if they don't have any at all, then how, like, what else are they considering, like how well they are training, how is the recruitment, like how everyone's quality mindset is, like how are they testing. So there's a lot of stuff to uncover and pick in those things, if we say that.
It probably depends, would you say, slightly on the sort of industry sector as well? Because I can't, there's some industries where you just can't imagine that they wouldn't be able to, that they couldn't have people in dedicated quality roles. If we look at financial services, for example, like, it surely would expose you to a lot of risk if you didn't have people doing that.
Yeah, I think it depends. Yeah, that's true. That it depends on the industry as well. And again, just to reiterate, right? When I say, like, we need quality engineers in every team, like, it's everything is context here. But even if we have a quality engineer or tester on a team, it doesn't it shouldn't be something like they are the ones who are doing the testing, and you create the culture or mindset of throwing it on over the wall kind of a culture. But it's more about, like, we are building quality from the basics, from the team level, and slowly building upon the department level. So that's how, like, I will see that as.
Any final thoughts, Matt?
Yeah, I mean, the main thing that springs to mind if you're going to automate everything to reduce your QE team is what happens when the next change comes along. There is, as much as automation is great and it's really fast, there's no substitute for the inquiring mind of the human. And I think a lot of people in this industry probably fell into testing through having that inquiring mindset and that what happens if I do this, rather than just test the requirement, just think about how it's being used. And even AI at the moment can't quite do that. So personally, I think there's always going to be a need for QE people, and testing it is still going to be up there. Do we have to change the way that we approach it? Absolutely. We've got to move with the times, but we're still needed, hopefully.
I
Got a
think
few
that,
years left.
I think that is a wonderful way to finish as well. Not just this event, but also if you like close the year. So yeah, tools, technologies, advancements, and AI and everything. But as you said, and also as Madhuri said in the comment we flashed up here, there's no substitute for the human mind and for critical thinking. So all power to the quality engineer. All power to you both for being on the panel and for coming on for the second week in a row after the hiccup last week as well. So I honestly really do appreciate it. Thanks for sharing the time and for your commitment to doing it.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So happy Christmas to everyone. Hope you have a nice break. Hopefully everyone has some time off, and we'll be back in the new year with some more good content, hopefully. So thanks a lot for listening. We're going to end the live stream there.
Thank you.